Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of SaaSy AF. We're joined by Rachel Curtis, founder and CEO of Incisio. Am I saying that correctly?
Close. Inicio.
Inicio AI, spending 30 years in the financial services industry, quite a closed off industry, into building something that is trying to go against the grain. So thank you so much for joining us today, Rachel.
Thanks for having me.
Where I really want to start here is why now and why this? You've obviously spent a lot of time working within the financial services industry with teams that struggle with conversations and emotionally very different and not always very human. What made you finally say, right, I'm going to build something to try and fix this?
Yeah, it wasn't my life plan. I guess it was a very odd moment of serendipity where I was sort of hit with the problem and the solution all at once and then couldn't really ignore it, I guess. So about 6 years ago, I was working for a bank, doing a digital transformation project. And as part of that, you see all the tech companies come in and show you their products. And one of those brought in sort of the new breed of conversational AI, sort of chatbot stuff. But if you think 6 odd years ago, we were all having a pretty rubbish relationship with chatbots. The banks were deploying them really, really badly. We were all swearing at them. They were just not helpful. And I think in that space, we were starting to adopt digital. So we wanted a really slick digital process where we could self-serve. But when it fell over, I wanted a human on a chat or on a phone that answered my question. I didn't want to find my way around your chatbot. So I could see though that this technology they'd brought in was different and it was moving on. And I was sort of quite conflicted because I couldn't see where the use case was at that stage. Where was the group of humans that were going to adopt this technology and sort of and really get close to it? So I parked it at that stage and moved on. And it was about a week later, one of the guys that was working on the project for me was in London, and it was quite late one evening, and he ended up having to intervene when, unfortunately, a very heavily pregnant lady was trying to take her own life. And he sort of got talking to her to try and keep her safe while he was waiting for the police. And her story was she was in debt. She owed money to a number of companies, and they were all asking her to fill an I&E form in. At which point I said, "What's an I&E form?" Because that hadn't been my background. And he explained it's an income and expenditure form. It's how a financial company assesses affordability for a consumer to see, can they set a payment plan up? Do we need to send them for debt advice? What situation are they in? And for her, she struggled with her money and she was being asked to fill in what was quite a long, complicated financial form. She'd been sent a paper copy that was about 6 pages long. She'd been sent a digital link that just she'd opened but been quite intimidated by that. So eventually she tried a call with one of the organisations she owed money to. And that call was a young agent going through all of her detailed finances and sort of maybe being a little bit judgmental about what she was spending her money on. She just became very embarrassed. She felt a lot of shame and she abandoned that phone call and was then in the situation of, I can't do this, can't do it on my own. I can't speak to somebody to get help. I'm stuck. And that was sort of the light bulb moment where it was sort of, is this a group of consumers that need help but not from a human? And is that where virtual agents may be able to really do good? And then I've got a very good friend who owns a market research agency, and I spoke to him and we did some research. I didn't know how big the problem was, and it turned out pretty big, really. A lot of people in this space feel that shame and embarrassment and need a way to be able to engage with the task of understanding their affordability.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely a more prescient issue with the past few years with the cost of living crisis that is pretty much gripping everywhere in the world, and it doesn't look like there's anything coming that's going to slow that down. Certainly from how people are feeling anyway, and the situations that they're getting into. So, have you seen much of an increase then with people coming to services like yourselves, and trying to get an answer from something that is inherently not going to judge them?
Yeah, and I think there's also that maybe lack of financial education in schools, like
For
People
sure.
just haven't done budgets. The amount of times, even the staff of the organisation, so we're a B2B product, when we're selling this into an organisation, we get the agents to test it first. And the amount of agents that have gone, oh wow, I didn't realise I was spending that much on takeaways, or oh my goodness, I've never really seen how my money sort of,
I mean, I can't really, I'm not going
I
to
will
sit and
make
judge
you
any of
do
that
it,
because
Aaron. You will do a budget.
oh no, no, I'm not talking about budgets. I live and breathe those, but I'm thinking more sort of, so if, if I was to be in a percentile of Deliveroo or Uber Eats customers, I would probably be, be quite embarrassed.
Well, no judgment from our virtual agent. You can order what you like. That's fine. But yeah, there was a real sort of yeah, struggle of people doing what is should be a straightforward task of budgeting, and being able to sort of get that down in a simple way. And the growth of the requirement for it, as you say, with the cost of living crisis, has been for organisations. They were just really struggling to cope with the volumes, and when it was always done with call centre agents over the phone. That's just really resource intensive. It's probably the low end of agent recruitment. So these are your young people. They'll move on from jobs quickly, so you're constantly training. They're just within this perfect storm of increasing volumes, not being able to recruit and retrain, that just caused that sort of issue. So our virtual agent also helps human agents in call centres. So it prompts and guides them. So we take a lot of training time out for agents as well, because they don't need to know how to fill the form in. Our agent guides them to do it if they need to do it over the phone with a customer.
Fantastic. So I suppose just going on from sort of both sides there, there's obviously the thing that every startup and every company has to do, which is go out there and raise capital, right? So I'm interested to know, what was your interactions like early on with investors? And I'm talking about this from a privileged position myself of being very lucky that I don't really have much concerns around ordering this takeaway and things like that. But obviously there's people that are people as investors are inherently more privileged than myself, and I'm not going to speak to your background. But how did you find those conversations with people like that have never been close to that actual lived experience? Is it an understanding one? Is it shock? Is it or are you just letting the numbers and the success prove out the actual business case for it?
Yeah, it was really challenging in the early days, and I guess I didn't realise why initially. So, we funded largely from angels in the early days, and I'd go into some pitches, and people would be so motivated by what we were doing, and they'd understand it, and they'd just be, giving us money, they'd want to invest, and then I'd go into other scenarios and just be like, absolutely not, just hard nose. And I was trying to get underneath why that was, and then I went to one pitch event one evening where there was a bar, so alcohol was involved, and that always increases a little bit of honesty. And there was one chap that I stood with at the bar, and he said, Rachel, I think you're great. If you pitched any other business, I would be giving you my money and backing you, but people in debt need to just spend less money. And that was the penny drop moment for me, where I was like, okay, I get it now. If people don't connect with the problem, they're not gonna, want to invest in your business. And I guess that led us to focus on two categories. There was those that really understood the space and the call center challenges and the problem we were solving. And then there was sort of those that wanted to invest from a philanthropic angle, and they really liked the story, so they invested in that side of it, and that's when we got more success, really.
Yeah, and I can imagine that it's probably a different conversation with those rags to riches type folks that have come from nothing, and they've built their own wealth, and they're now throwing down the ladder, so to speak, of wanting to support not support good companies. But if a good company is doing good in the world, then it's a bit of a win-win.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was where we got that. I guess a lot of early angel investment is heartstrings. It's an emotional investment sometimes, and I think they either really got the problem, they'd seen it. One of our investors had run one of the debt call centres, and he said to me, I walked up the stairs one day, and I'd got agents in tears on the stairs because they'd been on the phone with, you know, a mother that couldn't feed her children, and they were trying to go through her I&E with her, and it was like, do you know how serious this is? And so yeah, he was kind of really connected to the business from that because he understood the problem.
Yeah, and I think it's even with it all comes down to, despite your best intentions as an agent, you're not, if you genuinely aren't judging anybody, and but people go into those conversations on the other end, and they have the perception of judgment, if that makes sense. So even if they're speaking to the most kind-hearted person in the world that's being as helpful as possible, from an introspective and an internal element, they're going in with it thinking that they're being judged, despite what they're probably getting on the other end of the phone. So you're almost battling that psychology as well.
The agent has a really tough job of the form that they're typically filling in is sort of a regulatory set one called a standard financial statement. It's quite long, it goes into detail. So they've got a tough job to do to kind of get through all these questions. And the more questions you're asking, the more embarrassed the consumers sort of get, and that shame's becoming more obvious. And they do have to challenge sometimes, you know, where somebody's spending slightly more than a standard figure, and whose life is standard these days. So if you don't quite fit in the box, you're going to get challenged on, well, why are you spending that much on groceries? And it doesn't maybe matter how you ask that question.
Yeah,
You may feel that judgment if you're on the end of it.
for sure. I suppose I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, because I'm actually very much in the same boat of yours, of we need to be educating kids on financial literacy, and how to get a mortgage, what does your pension look like, what is a pension, salary sacrifice, all of that kind of stuff, that even what is a credit score, how not to mess up your credit score. Like I would love to see the statistics around kids coming out of school and them just completely screwing the rest of their lives, or a decent part of their lives, trying to recover their credit scores, because we don't have that financial literacy. So if you were to, let's say ideal world, you and I get to design a financial literacy class, what does that actually look like to you? So what is the things that you think that we should be embedding in kids going through, whether it's high school or primary education, so that they're getting the best step as they leave education?
I guess it's probably two things. It's the ability to budget, the ability to understand. I mean, I remember my son's 21 now, and I remember going through a process with him when he got his first job and he'd gone to university. And the first summer of university, he got in a right mess with his finances. And I couldn't understand why. I said, God, surely I'd trained you on this. And we went through it. I got him to do our form again. I was right, go through it. And he'd just not realised that he was on holiday and he was having fun, and he was on a 0 hours contract. So his income had changed. And for some reason, he'd just not quite tied together that income, expenditure, and the end result. And then he got to the point where I said, right, so I need to work 2 days a week if I want to have that lifestyle, or I can change my lifestyle and work 1 day a week. And now he totally gets it. But it was that penny drop moment of, and it's really obvious, but that connection of what I'm earning, what I'm spending, and how that sits together, what things cost in terms of budgeting, that sort of education. But then I think it is the different types of credit as well and what they mean. So most of the people that we see using our product through our clients in, say, their 30s have got maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 grand of debt. That debt originated from a credit card they took out when they were 18. They got offered it, came through the post, they got £1,500. They thought it was free money. They bought a load of rubbish, trainers, whatever, and they could never pay it back. Or they didn't pay it back when they could, because they were like, oh, that was just free. And then that became 3 grand, 4 grand, and it just grew and grew and grew. And then they never earned enough, or didn't choose to pay it off. They chose to buy other things. And now that debt is a complete, weight around their neck that they just can't shift. And you get in that sort of debt trap then, that even when you want to borrow, everything you borrow is more expensive than somebody else. So you're just stuck. So I think it's the budgeting ability, and credit products, and don't take a credit card out when you're 18 and max it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I haven't done that myself. I couldn't agree more. But if I was a bit more of the initiated that I am now, I probably would have made a lot of different decisions. But it's kind of, you either get into the live it, or you get the early education, which I think both of us are advocates for, just based on this conversation. One thing I'd love to touch on, Rachel, is we've kind of got on this side of the pond, we've kind of got a different outlook on our financial lives. And what I mean by that is we're very much living to the next day, the weekend, or like the following week. We're not really looking at this from a longevity point of view. Whereas if you look at the likes of the US, there's, people are very early on planning for their retirement, their 401ks. They're thinking about stocks and bonds and the likes of that. Why do you think that is, that we're such a short-sighted? Now, I don't want to generalize. Obviously, there's people here in our part of the world that are a lot more thought through and thorough and thoughtful about their financial future. But it does seem a bit of a nexus between the two, and I would love to just get your view on that.
I don't know if it's back to understanding again. So, just this weekend, I was talking to a friend's daughter about her student loan, and she didn't stay at university, so she owes about £4,000, and I think it's 14% or something that she's paying. And she's earning now, not enough to pay the loan back automatically, but she's living at home. So, so you say, oh, I'm going to save. This is how much I'm earning on my savings account. And I was like, no, pay student loan off. Just get that clear. And she went, no, it's fine. When I start earning enough, they'll take that a little bit over time. And I know student loans is a controversial topic at the minute generally, but I think it just illustrates the point that she'd not made the connection between how much that was actually going to cost her if she went down that route of paying it through a salary. So I don't know if it's that, and I don't know. We've been doing we're just moving our products into the wealth management space as well. So sort of mini fact find stuff to enable sort of mass financial advice, or not advice, actually mass support for that. And I think it's just in that space of not connected to that wealth management stuff. Is how do we explain, like, a lot of the pension providers are just desperately trying to engage and communicate. It's not that they're not trying, it's that consumers are not listening. So I don't know, actually, Aaron, in terms of what is stopping us thinking slightly more long term. It all just seems very short. But I do know that once you get through to somebody and they understand, they do make sensible decisions. But again, so does it come back to that education in schools to make people open to understanding? I don't know what they do across the pond, as you say. Do they do more in schools? Is that what's driving that different behaviour as adults?
I believe it's very much like a generational type at home type thing. I'm unsure about the actual curriculum in the US. I just know from speaking to people that it's very much ingrained in the culture almost of thinking about how do they maximize their chance of enjoying their lives post work and post their career or so on. So I'm unsure about the actual. It just seems to be a lot more cultural from that point of view of. They've got obviously the aspirational American dream and so on. Now we could go into whether that still exists in today's world, but I think that it's definitely more of a I can, and I'm going to make the best out of my life, or the best opportunities that I possibly can, and I think a lot of the time what I tend to see on this side of the pond is very much. I'll just get by and it'll be okay.
Yeah, more short term, definitely.
Yeah. So Rachel, I would love to get a bit of an insight into your own journey coming from financial services, which you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I imagine is quite a male dominated industry.
Yeah, less so these days, but yeah, 30 years ago when I started, or Actually, it was the positions that were, so everybody in junior roles was female and everybody in senior roles was male.
How did that change your journey from going into, obviously tech could be described, although I think very much less so, as being highly male dominated. I think it's closer to well, heading towards hopefully a parity. But I would love to know, did that change your journey at all on how you decided to get into the industry that you're in now?
I don't think I thought about it in that way. Like I say, the reason I didn't plan to do this, I sort of got hit with that problem and solution and sort of got dragged into it just wanting to solve the problem. Um, had I really thought about, Rachel, are you really gonna, be CEO of a AI company when you don't have a tech background? Is that actually a good idea? So yeah, I didn't think about it in that way. I guess I get asked about the gender question a lot, and I still really struggle with kind of what the problem is, because most people I speak to don't want it to be that way, and they do want a solution to it. It's about patterns for me. It's pattern recognition. So maybe male founders find it easier to get funding because historically that's where the funding has gone, and therefore in time all the work that's going into supporting female and diverse founders should come good, because those patterns will change with us doing that. So I don't know whether it's about patience to some extent, as long as we put in the effort in to change what the funding arena looks like, we'll get there. But it's really hard to say, because I've never tried to fundraise or build a business, I guess, and I guess I've gone on to funding there because I don't see it in the job. I don't struggle in terms of going in and selling the product as female versus male, I don't believe. But I know it's harder in funding because I'm told it's harder, and we had a lot of no's, so it must be. But then lots of males have had no's as well. So it's very hard for me to say exactly what it is, but I do think generically, if we can change what the fundraising landscape looks like by doing these focused efforts to get more funding to diverse founders, then in time we should see that just be the norm, should be better.
Yeah, and you would, and then the usual loop of that is those diverse founders and those female founders then go into the funding world, and that should cycle back, all being well. So here's hoping that we get there sooner rather than later. I suppose just a couple of finishing questions, Rachel. So I suppose what would be interesting is what's next for you guys. Like, what you obviously mentioned going into wealth management sphere and support from that perspective. Where do you see your guys going in the next? I understand that this is a ridiculous question because the market's moving so fast from the tech that's available. So I'm not going to ask for the next 6 months. I'm going to ask for the next sort of, month, 3 months. What are you guys planning?
Yeah, I guess ultimately we're a very niche solution, and we want to own the way affordability is done. And we do that across, we started in the debt space for obvious founding reasons. We've moved into new lending now, so we're helping some of the maybe subprime lenders where they need to do a more detailed affordability assessment at lending point. You can't just do that CRA and open banking check. So we're already in that space. I've mentioned then, wealth management, which is about, there's some new regulations saying that there's millions of people that could invest a small amount, but they don't do that because a financial advisor relationship doesn't quite cost in at that low investment level. So we're sort of, our product is configurable, and we've made it be able to do like a mini fact find, so we'll help in the wealth space as well. And then it's sort of about just growing that product to be the best way that you assess affordability across those use cases. And it's sort of that deep plug-in where it's just the product that everybody uses in their own brand. We white label it, and it just sits underneath everything, powering everything sort of quietly but effectively.
Amazing. So the last question I have for you, Rachel, is one piece of advice that you would, well, it's kind of two questions in one, if you will. One piece of advice to live by for any founder or anybody that you want to point this advice to, and any book, podcast, or Anything like that that you think that founders should be listening to, reading, or digesting?
I think the phrase I like and I use on myself regularly is it is what it is.
Yeah, I love that one.
It's just that acceptance, in my younger days, I probably spent so much energy and time trying to change things that I was never going to change. And it's that accept it, it is done, move on. What do you learn from it? What are you going to do differently? So yeah, that it is what it is really powerful for me. And from a book perspective, I was when you invited me on, I looked through your list of previous guests and had a slight imposter syndrome moment in terms of the great people you've had on. But one of them I saw was Catty Kay, and early in my career, I read The Confidence Code, and that really helped me in terms of, I had a real battle with imposter syndrome when I was younger, and that book was quite pivotal in terms of, you know, you can grow your confidence by taking small risks, and doing it that way was really helpful.
No, I love that. I love that, and I think I kind of look at imposter syndrome. I get it all the time. Myself as it's almost your grounding mechanism of this is how you're feeling, and but let's rationalize it and let's talk our way, or let's logically get our way, get ourselves out of this in order to continue doing the role that we have to the best, but also remember where you came from. Remember all of the how lucky you are effectively to be in the position that you're in. So I love that for sure. Rachel, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate you taking the time. No imposter syndrome for coming on here. We love speaking to founders, doers, makers, and some shakers as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.